Very excited to welcome to the pod now Trevor Sikkema. He's covered the Tampa Bay Bucs. He's a senior NFL writer for the Draft Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Tampa Bay Trey. Trevor, welcome in, man. How are you?
I am doing great. Appreciate you guys having me. Very excited.
So it is, yes, we're looking at a division I think is ripe with intrigue, of course, Super Bowl champs. And let's just start, I think, as like a collective view of the NFC South. There's a ton of movement here, right? You've got Brees retiring. You've got Atlanta, Carolina, kind of, I don't know, I think in sort of a reboot mode, even if they're not ready to admit it, although We'll see if they're ready to admit it. So as you try to size up this division, what jumps out to you?
I mean, the NFC South is never short of entertainment, one way or the other. You've either got one team in the cellar that's trying to climb their way back up, and that brings intrigue, or it's normally one or two teams that are going to be competing for the division title and hopefully a deep playoff run, they would think. And so I don't think that this year is any different. In Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm not going to say run it back because Bruce Arians would kill me. The going for two thing, repeating. I think they brought a lot of their guys back, and so they're absolutely primed for another deep playoff run. The Saints, probably the most intriguing team, right? Because they were so good for the last 3 or 4 years. They had Super Bowl aspirations. Now the main component of that, Drew Brees, is gone. What remains? We've had the debates. Who was it? Was it Bill Belichick or was it Tom Brady? Well, now I think we're going to find out a lot of, hey, was it Sean Payton or was it Drew Brees? And I think that's going to maybe not as much hostility there as there was with Belichick and Brady, but we're going to figure that out with the Saints. Panthers are very intriguing just because Matt Rule, he's been known to be a great rebuilder back in his time at Temple and then Baylor. So now he's trying to do it in the NFL. We're probably going to see them get pretty aggressive to go get a quarterback in the NFL draft. And then, of course, Atlanta, everything that's going on with it, with a talented offense that they have, brand new head coach. How's it all going to work out going from a defensive head coach to an offensive head coach? There's a lot of intrigue top to bottom. It's not Super Bowl caliber intrigue top to bottom, but no matter what, I think you always got to pay attention to the NFC South.
So, Trevor, before we jumped on the show, I looked at the Bucs odds to win their division, and they're only minus 159, which I think is absolutely insane. What other team do you think is the most likely to compete with the Buccaneers? Because, frankly, I'm not sure there's anybody close, but you tell me, which team are you the most nervous about as a lifelong Bucs fan?
I think I would still have to say the Saints. I mean, it's either the Saints or the Falcons because it depends what you trust more. Do you trust Matt Ryan, like the entrenched quarterback who's been there before, knows the division really well, knows the opponent, still has Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, still has that offense humming? Or do you trust the better roster? Because even without Drew Brees, I mean, the Saints are going to boast one of the most talented offensive lines in the league. Even without Sheldon Rankins and Malcolm Brown, they still have a really good defensive line. They've got good defensive players. They have good offensive weapons. So, I mean, it's all still there for the Saints minus quarterback. So really, I think it comes down to how much you trust Jameis Winston, which the word trust in Jameis Winston has just been very buzzworthy throughout his entire NFL career, maybe even going back to college. And so, it really kind of goes on that. I would say that it's either the Falcons or the Saints, but your point, Marcus, I don't think either of those teams are very close to Tampa Bay. And I think that it should kind of be a runaway here of Tampa, as much as it can be for a competitive division, a runaway for probably who's going to win it in 2021.
So, Trevor, the Bucs have drafted. I'm in love these last couple of draft classes. I'm an Iowa guy too, so Wirfs, of course, jumps out. And White looks like truly one of the best players in all of football, I guess, at this point. And so here they are, back of the first. They've filled a lot of needs already just by bringing back their guys. And you brought up kind of running it back, which is sort of a wise strategy. And yet, it's still a team with some age and some needs. So as you size up what looks like a Super Bowl roster again, where would you focus maybe that on, or even in the tail end of free agency or bringing some people in?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of people who don't follow the Buccaneers super closely were probably just thinking okay, they can't bring back everybody, right? Levante David, Chris Godwin, Shaq Barrett, and Ndamukong Suh, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette, all of these guys were hitting free agency and could possibly leave. Well, I forgot Rob Gronkowski's name in there as well. How could I forget Rob Gronkowski? So you have all of these names, and so far, all of them that they have negotiated with are back. They're still negotiating with Ndamukong Suh. I'm not so sure that Leonard Fournette is going to come back, and then maybe Antonio Brown will if he just wants to take a major discounted price. But the Bucs were in good salary cap health, and so that's what allowed them to do that. And so all of that to give context to, I think the mock drafts that we've been reading and people on the outside have been okay, they're just simply going to go after the position that they don't get. And I've kind of been trying to tell people over the last couple of months, they're probably going to bring them all back. They had the ability to do it. And so this position now really becomes best player available for their situation. And so I think that there's two different routes that they could go. I think that they could either look at their running back room, and maybe Leonard Fournette's not back, or even if you're interested in Leonard Fournette, maybe you think you could upgrade there. Maybe you don't fully trust Ronald Jones, because I don't think that they fully trusted Ronald Jones last year. You could go with Javonte Williams, a Najee Harris, a Travis Etienne, and just get a really nice running back upgrade to say, hey, this is the guy who's going to play the most for us. Our team is already built out. We have our starters already, except maybe running back. And so if you want to take a luxury pick on a running back at the back end of the first round, that might make sense for a team that is already Super Bowl caliber, as we could see basically across the board. If not that, then I think that they might invest in a premium position either on the offensive or defensive line. I would probably tell you defensive line is more likely, an interior defensive lineman, an edge rusher, but heck, maybe they go offensive line as well. They get a guy in the farm system. They let him play as a swing tackle if anybody happens to get hurt inside and out, and then maybe could be a starter down the road. Those are the two visions I see for them as targets for how they could approach the back end of the first round.
So a lot of the reasons why they've been able to bring back all these guys is because of their cap situation, as you mentioned, but it's because of the way they've been drafting, correct? I mean, they've had a pretty good track record over the last, 4 or 5 drafts. How would you rate the Buccaneers as, one of the best drafting teams in the NFL?
I mean, it's crazy, right? Because, Jason Light, his first year as GM for the Buccaneers, it was 2015. That was the Jameis Winston season, I believe, or maybe it was the year before. It was either 2014 or 2015. But either way, he was a couple of drafts in, and then he had that 2016 draft. And the 2016 draft was Vernon Hargreaves, Noah Spence, Roberto Aguayo with their first 3 picks. And everybody was like, okay, maybe this guy doesn't really know what he's doing. And, that was a draft that certainly he would like to forget. But man, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. I mean, it's just been home runs one after the other. And so Jason, from my time covering the team closely, he has always been very good at being willing to admit a mistake, whether it's a free agent or a draft position or maybe an area of the team that he thought was further along or whatever it is. He has always been willing to say, hey, you know what? I messed up here. Let's learn. Let's not do it again. Let's do something different. And I really feel like his really good drafts over the last couple of years have been a product of that attitude. They have been able to be very self-reflective of what they do, how they messed up early in his tenure, and how strong they are now. And so there's no doubt about it. A championship team has to have the perfect combination of veterans and then also younger players who are contributing. And there's no doubt about it. You look across that roster and you see 2 rookies making a big difference in Antoine Winfield Jr. and Tristan Wirfs. And you see 2 of the oldest guys on the team, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, Levante David, all those guys still there as well. Jason Pierre-Paul is a guy who they brought in as well. And so, man, it was just a perfect combination. And there's no doubt you got to be able to knock it out of the park with the draft.
So I want to jump to Carolina because I know we talked a little bit about the Saints being a threat. I think Carolina is probably the most interesting team in the top 10 because there's maybe an assumption, a natural assumption. Are they going to jump to 3? Are they going to stand pat, wait for their guy? I just think they're a team that can make some stuff happen. And of course, the connection to Miami seems natural. So, Trevor, what do you think about, well, to me too, it's not just, where do they go, but it's also an interesting direction for this franchise. There are some playmakers, obviously, there on offense. Mm-hmm. They have some major needs, obviously, quarterback, of course, being one of them. So I like to put you in the GM role and say, what do you do? And then maybe what do you expect to happen?
I mean, if I'm in the GM seat, I'm doing what I think they're actually doing behind the scenes. And I'm basically doing whatever I need to do to get my quarterback in the future. I mean, I love Teddy. I mean, he was my QB1 when he was coming out. I got a soft spot in my heart for Teddy Bridgewater, but he just never manifested into the franchise quarterback, the long-term guy. I think that obviously he is good enough to be a starter in the NFL, but he's kind of a stopgap player at this point. And I think that the Panthers knew that when they signed him to that 3-year contract. They've just kind of accelerated their timeline a little bit here where it's like, okay, we had him last year. Now we have a chance to potentially go up and get a franchise quarterback to take over for him. Let's do it. And I think that, when you look at potentially number 3 for Miami is probably the big one. I would tell you that the Atlanta Falcons are also a prime team to trade back, but obviously Atlanta's not going to do any favors with Carolina because they play them twice a year. So
Right.
they're not about to give them a quarterback that they really like there. So really, that number 3 overall pick probably becomes the most coveted one. And I'm sure those conversations have already happened and been happening for a long time between Matt Rule, David Tepper, Scott Fitterer, those guys who are in charge of what they do with the draft board, because that's what I would do. I'd go up and get a quarterback back if I can, a Trey Lance, a Justin Fields, something like that. And if they're staying at 9, I have a hard time, or I'm sorry, if they're staying at 8, I have a hard time believing that one of those 4 quarterbacks is going to make it there. They could stand to get a middle linebacker upgrade, sure. They could also stand to get a really nice CB1 player. They could use a tight end, but again, I'm just not so sure any of those positions trump what needs to be an all-in attempt to go get one of those best quarterbacks. So I think that that's what you're going to see Carolina do, but maybe those are a couple of positions that they also prioritize if they can't get up there.
All right, Trevor, I want to ask you about Atlanta because I think they made one of the biggest moves of the offseason that I don't think anybody is really talking about. They restructured Matt Ryan's contract. So in 2022, he'll have a cap number of $48 million, and then in 2023, a cap number of $43.6 million at the age of 38. To me, that would signal that they're not drafting a quarterback. And I thought this team was in a perfect, position to draft one at number 4. Tell us, what is Atlanta going to do? Because I'm just fascinated with their pick inside the top 5.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting back and forth between maybe draft fans or Falcons fans who wish they could make a decision for their team that would be better in the long term, which is potentially drafting a quarterback at number 4 overall, and more the reality that was actually there, because you got to think about this too. Coaches are there to, of course, win football games, keep their job, keep the checks coming, right? This is Arthur Smith's first time as a head coach. And I just, for as much as I liked the idea of Atlanta getting a quarterback, I had a hard time convincing myself that Arthur Smith, as a first-time head coach, with his first top 5 selection that he's going to have, was going to pick a player that wasn't going to play for him for the first 2 years. I didn't see that being the case. And I know Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, their GM, they were both at Trey Lance's pro day. They were taking a good hard look at him. And I think that was
that. They've got to do that.
Right. That was certainly their due diligence there. But I agree with you. With the restructuring of Matt Ryan's contract, they cleared up a little bit of cap here. I believe his cap went down to right under $27 million for this season. And like you said, north of 40 the next 2 years that follow. Oof. To me, that says that they're going to be committed to Matt Ryan. And you know what? To me, that's fine. Like, I think the offense is good. You got the playmakers around you. Yeah, you got to upgrade the offensive line a little bit, maybe get an extra tight end in there or two. But Matt Ryan is not the problem for this team. He is far from the problem. And so I think that Arthur Smith's just going to try to build the best roster he can. And I actually don't think that picking at number 4 overall is the best way to do that. I think this is a team that is primed to trade down. You got to think about this too. Terry Fontenot, where does he come from? Comes from New Orleans. What does New Orleans do in the draft? They get aggressive. They go up. They trade up. They go get their guy. They have a few amount of picks, but they try to make them very impactful, and that's what they want to do. If you're Terry Fontenot, you can give yourself the ability to really do that, have that kind of flexibility over the next couple of years if you trade back here. And I'm talking about trading back from 4 to 12. 15, 19. I don't care. Trade back with Washington to 19 if they're about to give you 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks for the next 3 years, because then you've got all the ammo you want. You can navigate the draft however you want. And I think that background with Arthur Smith and with Terry Fontenot, I think is really important in terms of what they could target. Certainly a linebacker, corner's a big need, tight end's a possible need for him, safety. I mean, a lot of stuff on the defensive side. Edge rusher's probably their biggest if I'm really being honest, but you can get all those things in this defensive class later in the draft. So trade back if you're Atlanta. That's the best way to do it.
It dawned on me as we moved to New Orleans, like Tom Brady at his age being the surest, stablest thing in this division is kind of, I guess it's like, it's expected at this point, but it also is kind of funny. Like that's the place that you don't, oh yeah, he's there and he just signed a 4-year deal. And then like the rest of the division with Matt Ryan being the closest thing to stability at the cap number is crazy. The New Orleans is fascinating. We've talked about it, Trevor, Marcus, and I, of what we would do. And I'm just curious because to me, Taysom Hill over the course of a full season being a full-time guy just seems like a really bad idea. Yeah. And I'm not saying Jameis is a great idea, but I'm saying at surface value, it seems like a better idea. So I ask you the same. now I'm making you coach. What do you do in this instance, and which way are you going?
I think, you've got to be able to give Jameis Winston, I don't want to say the benefit of the doubt, but like the first crack at the actual QB1 spot, because I think that allows you to really continue to let Taysom Hill be more of an impact player. If you keep him at the quarterback spot, yeah, I guess the ball is in his hand every snap. And if you're comfortable with that, that's fine. I'm not. Like I watched the guy try to throw it deep twice, and like I don't want him doing that again. And the more tape you get on Taysom Hill, the less gadgety he becomes, the less surprising he becomes. And teams will basically just be like, shoot, we're going to play single high, not because maybe we want to do it, because there ain't a chance you're completing anything beyond 30 yards on us. And so all of that is just too limiting, even for a guy like Sean Payton, who's very creative at what he does as an offensive mind. With Jameis Winston, we remember him from Tampa Bay. I mean, he was throwing it all over the yard, and he had a lot of great receivers to do it, but he's fearless as a quarterback. And so, yeah, of course, you hope the turnovers are a little bit less than they were when he was going 30 for 30 with Tampa Bay in his last year as a starter. But I think that that's still your highest ceiling. You have got to play Jameis as your QB1 until he fails. And I think that needs to be their strategy moving forward, because that's going to be the only thing that allows them to compete the way they need to, I believe, for Tampa Bay. You've got to keep Taysom Hill as more of an offensive weapon, as an X-factor player, as a high-impact guy. And he could be valuable for you there. Maybe not as valuable as his contract says he is, but, like he could be valuable in that way if he's not the full-time starting quarterback. And so I think that's probably the case for the Saints. They're really just riding it out, because picking to the back end of the first round, there ain't going to be a quarterback there who's worth it. They're going to be able to start right away.
Adam, all I know is I'm going to bet on Tampa Bay as soon as this podcast is over to win the division. That's my biggest takeaway from this.
Well, I guess, yeah. Well, to tie a bow on this thing, Trevor, I mean, like, and I'll look, New Orleans is clearly the greatest threat. I mean, I think Carolina is kind of interesting if they do find a quarterback because of Brady and Rule. I'm a college guy, so I think there's excellence there and they could get things going. But I feel like the Saints are entering this point of cap hell. Plus, I mean, the talent does not match the cap. Like, you look at what the Bucs have tried to do and the players that they brought back, and I do not get that same vibe at all with New Orleans. Now, good coach, the calming force of Brady, which they don't have, obviously. Like, is this a team that is about to run into that wall? Because it when you look it down, and we're talking about Jameis and Taysom Hill, and look, I think Jameis could be okay. Like, but that's what we're left with. Like, could this be the end of the Saints run, or is there going to be a reboot here in short order? Because it feels like there might be.
If there's a reboot in short order, then it's more cap manipulation and magic from the New Orleans Saints that's on the horizon. Because as of right now, you're looking at the future and you're saying, like, all right, like this window is pretty much closing, and eventually you're going to have to pay on a lot of these contracts that you tried to pay it forward. Now, I want to make this clear. They did the right thing. When you have the quarterback, when you have the roster around you, when you draft as well as they have, when you've got the players in the trenches, they went all in on their winning window. And over the last 3 seasons, 2017, 2018, 2019, maybe not as much 2020, but over that 4-year span, the Saints had one of the best rosters in the NFL. They allowed themselves to compete and gave themselves a chance at a championship. They didn't win one, but that doesn't mean it was the wrong decision. I just think that eventually, over the next couple of years, we're going to look at a very, very different Saints team. We knew that it would start whenever Drew Brees decided to hang him up. Now he has. Now we're going to see what the waterfall or the avalanche might be for the Saints.
Trevor, really appreciate you joining us, man. I think we'll obviously be doing it again. You've covered a team that obviously we're interested in, a lot of people are interested in. So tell us what you've got going on leading up to the draft and throughout what is a really fun NFL offseason.
Yeah. Oh, man, we've only got, what is it? 5 to 6 weeks until the draft. Something like that. That's crazy that we're almost here. I feel like there's so much to talk about between now and then. And we'll be doing all the kinds of talking over at thedraftnetwork.com. If your listeners haven't seen it, we've got full prospect rankings. We've got updated team needs after free agency. We've even got a mock draft machine where, hey, if you look at my mock draft or Mel Kiper's mock draft or anybody's mock draft, and you say, that guy's a bum, I can mock draft better than them. Do it. Go over to the mock draft machine and do it and learn something about the prospects too. We got all kinds of prospect profiles that everybody can see. So we're covering the draft as best we can. We're trying to give you guys as many tools and information as you can. Appreciate you guys having me on the podcast. I had a blast. Hopefully we can do it again.
Awesome. Trevor Sikkema of the Draft Network. We will talk to you soon, man. Take care.
Thanks, you too.